pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Look at this. Come here.
Trash. Basura. Trash.
The pod bay doors are open. Thank you very much for joining us on our second week of Turkey Month. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here, as always, getting through a book that's not quite finished. My co-host, Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com, and the series Tuesdays with Oscar, Jerry Dean Roberts. What's up, Jer?
You really want to know what happens when Jerry gets mad? If you really want to know what happens when Jerry gets mad, I'll tell you. Just show him shit like this.
Oh, yeah.
Just show him a piece of garbage like this, and I'll show you what happens when Jerry gets mad.
So, we're talking about the inexplicable...
Because this movie is terrible!
The inexplicably bad Barry Levinson film.
Barry Levinson!
Sphere, based on Michael Crichton's novel of the same title, starring Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, Samuel L. Jackson, and Peter Coyote, and Liv Schreiber,
and Queen Latifah.
And holy crap! There's no reason why this is so bad. This is Turkey
Month, by the way. This is when we talk about nothing but bad movies.
And you know, I saw this in the theater in 1998.
This wasn't. I'm going to be honest with you. As bad movies go, this wasn't as much fun to skate through as Star Trek V.
Well, no. Well, see, here's the thing. I have
both of them are have an equally messed up trajectory.
Well, yeah, but at least Star Trek V is entertaining.
Entertainingly bad.
Entertainingly bad. Sphere is just mind-numbingly awful. This continues my my use of Turkey Month to attack the films that have done me the most damage.
Well, and you also seem to pick the films. You know, remember Siskel and Ebert used to do this when they picked bad movies for their worst of the year. They didn't just pick on the small fries. They actually went after the ones that had giant ambitions.
Oh yeah.
And put $500 million on the screen and the biggest stars in the world, and had nothing to say.
Right. To recap my previous year's vendettas, Dreamcatcher, The Village,
Event Horizon,
Collateral Beauty, Event Horizon, Winter's Tale.
Because honestly, this is the thing. When I bought a house, or when you bought a house, you probably put more thought into buying your home than these people did in spending millions of dollars on this movie.
Yes, tens of millions.
Tens of millions. And I am flummoxed by movies like this.
Yes.
Because this was a byproduct of Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Because after Jurassic Park, they thought that Michael Crichton was the next big thing.
Which is weird because they'd been adapting his novels for decades up until then.
And he directed Westworld.
Yeah.
And now let's just talk about Michael Crichton, because Michael Crichton he's one of those people that was not very focused on one thing.
Yeah, no.
He did a lot of stuff. He's one of those guys that seemed to be good at everything, but was never really focused enough to stay with one thing.
He was a jack of all trades and a master definitely of none.
Right.
His writing...
Did you read his books?
I have read several of his books,
Yeah.
and the quality of those books ranges as wildly as the quality of the movies that are based on his books.
I read Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
I read Congo.
Mm-hmm.
I read Airframe, but I don't remember if I finished it.
I know I didn't read Airframe because that was the first one that was released after he died,
Mhm.
and I didn't have any of that, and I had already moved on. I read Jurassic Park, The Lost World,
Yeah, I read
Congo,
Lost World.
Terminal Man,
Hmm.
Andromeda Strain. I've read.
I read a drama strain in high school.
Well, I read all of these in these. This was all while I was in high school. I was fascinated with Michael Crichton, and I believe I even read Sphere. Um,
He's generally hard to read
Incredibly hard to read.
because he's extremely technical. I remember the beginning of Airframe. The first, I would say, quarter of Airframe is just a description of what happens when an airliner goes down.
Well, if you remember in the Andromeda Strain, um, the book halfway through takes a 30-page detour. The book is only 180 pages.
Yeah,
It takes a 30 to 40, maybe even 50-page detour outlining exactly what constitutes a problem in science.
right.
So when I was reading the Andromeda Strain, I got to that. I got about 4 pages in, realized that this was going to take a long time.
Hmm.
Scanned through the book until I hit a character's name,
Yeah.
went back 2 pages, and then started reading
Hmm.
again. Like,
Hmm.
and I missed nothing from the story.
Jurassic Park, all that engine stuff.
Oh yeah,
The beginning of that book, I'd say the first 30 pages of that book are all over the place.
yeah.
I mean,
He was always a very unfocused writer. He didn't have singular points of interest that he wrote about.
mm,
He even like he was I wasn't he a medical doctor? He went to medical school.
created ER,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
had something to do with ER.
He was the creator of ER. I think he it was originally supposed to be a movie
It's supposed to be a
script.
movie.
It was supposed to be a movie script, and it didn't get anywhere, and they developed it as a TV show, and it became what it became.
Hmm.
Um, and he ran his course,
Hmm.
um, largely because the people that started adapting his work only wanted his name on it and didn't care if it was any good.
Yeah.
Now, um, my original idea of this was going to be talking about two terrible Michael Crichton adaptations, this
Hmm.
and Congo.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about Congo and I started thinking about Sphere, and I realized Congo's just bad because it's just a limp dick of a movie. It just doesn't
Hmm.
do anything, and it's hard to talk about. Now, Sphere, on the other hand, is
Sphere
a
seemed to have a lot more going for it.
it's a train wreck
Hmm.
of what could have been. Like this is Sphere is at the core of my antipathy towards shoddy sci-fi. Like if you
Yeah.
notice, I have a sci-fi movie every year we do Turkey Month because
Right.
I get very incensed over bad sci-fi.
Hmm.
And this is bad sci-fi.
Well, just because sci-fi has a bad name because of so much junk.
Yeah, the 50s. It's called the 50s.
Well,
Sci-fi.
it's not just the 50s, it's the 90s too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all this junk that they don't really know how to, they don't have the imagination to deal with this. Michael Crichton's writing is so all over the place that it has to be impossible to adapt unless you just rewrite it, as they did
Basically,
with Jurassic
yeah,
Park,
yeah,
effectively.
yeah. Which Jurassic Park is probably David Koepp's most successful screenplay.
Right. He had to take pieces and parts and put it into a cohesive narrative, because the problem with Michael Crichton is it doesn't lend itself to a straight narrative.
No, which I think is why it was perfect for David Koepp to adapt uh, Jurassic Park, because he doesn't really have much. He doesn't really pay much attention to what he's doing either.
Mm.
So the scattershotness of him naturally and the scattershotness of Crichton combined and actually made something cohesive. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was the one instance where two wrongs actually made a right.
Okay, let's talk for a second about Barry Levinson.
Yeah, let's.
When I saw Barry Levinson's name on this, I was shocked, because
Did you forget?
Barry Sonnenfeld, maybe.
Well, yeah. I could see
Barry Levinson?
This would have
Mr.
been,
Baltimore?
This would have been a goofball movie if Barry Sonnenfeld had had anything to do with it.
And it probably would have been better.
And probably would have been much better. It would
But-
have had at least a sense of humor.
But directed by Mr. Baltimore? I mean,
Mr. Rain Man?
he
Barry
Levinson,
he's not a scrub director.
he's not meant for this.
No.
He can direct good stuff.
Mhm.
I like his Baltimore stuff. I actually liked Liberty Heights. I like Diner. I like a lot of his stuff.
Diner. I even like Rain Man to a point. Although I have
He
not
writes-
seen it since my son was diagnosed with autism. But you know,
But that's a different show.
that's a different show.
He writes character details
You're right.
very well. Michael Crichton does not.
No.
Now you have to, let's put this in its place here. This came out in early 1998. It was originally supposed to be released at Christmas,
Oh God.
and they pushed it to February of the
Why?
following year.
Because see, January and February are the graveyard of release schedules.
Except for Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, they do kind of. Lately they've been doing that.
February's been changing because ever since the Lego Movie and Black Panther opened in
Right.
February, things are changing in February. January is still the month
The graveyard of Christmas
because
releases.
what they do is they dump the ones that they know are bad in
Mhm.
January because the Oscar nominees and contenders are still in the theater.
Well, that was the thing for this, because when this came out, Wag the Dog was coming out at the same time,
Which is a way better Barry Levinson movie.
which I think is the best Barry
It
Levinson
is.
movie.
It is.
And they didn't want to crunch the two movies together, so I think what they did was they moved it to February. It came out at the exact same time that Wag the Dog, that Barry Levinson and Dustin Hoffman were nominated for Wag the Dog.
Mm-hmm.
And this came out and it was garbage. Now let me tell you how I saw this. I saw this on a Tuesday night at 9:30 after work. And I was not having a great time in my life, not just at the movie. But I went to see this mostly because it was the only new movie that was opening and I wanted to see something. And it was one of those weird situations where you go into the theater and you're by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get the theater all to yourself, and 15 minutes into the movie, some jackass walks in and sits.
That has happened to me so many times.
Some jackass walks in and he either sits on the front row or sits right in front of you.
Yeah.
A 200 seat theater, and he sit right in front of you,
Or in the same aisle, or
right behind you.
right behind you, or like they're just too close. As you look, and I've actually, when that's happened to me, they've sat down. I've actually turned around,
Mhm.
looked at them.
I usually get up and move.
I just turn around, look at them, and then I turn back around, and it's just.
Nearly an hour into this movie, and it was about the hour mark. 6 people walked in.
Oh God.
Why bother?
I didn't understand this movie an hour in, and I was watching it for a full hour.
Well, first of all, I don't understand. How do you pay for a movie?
Why did they even let them in?
Why do you pay for it? Well, if they pay their money, they don't care.
No, but
But
a lot of places will after a certain point, after the movie gets to a certain point, after about
mhm,
15 or 20 minutes in, they'll actually take the showtime off and won't sell tickets to it anymore.
mhm. Well, I don't know because
It's possible.
these
Maybe they worked there.
no no these didn't look like they worked there
No, I mean maybe
because
they're on
when they
their day
came in
off and they came in for the
they were thundering in there like polar bears. And they sat down and they was an hour. They didn't bother to watch the movie, which I mean I get it, but they stayed for about 45 minutes and then got up and left, sticking me with the guy, you know.
yeah
And I was not having a good time, and the movie was
yeah
garbage.
yeah.
I love the opening. Well, first of all, you get 35 minutes of opening
Oh my
credits
god! And there are not good opening credits.
over Krakens.
They are yeah
A lot of Krakens.
bland spherical influenced lettering that
Over Elliot Goldenthal's score, which I'm convinced was for another movie.
it had to have been.
Elliot Goldenthal. He's a good musician. He won an Oscar for Frida.
Hmm.
But this score over these 35 minutes worth of
It is
credits.
forever long. The credit
Yeah.
sequence is forever long, and it doesn't see credit sequences are fine if they're used to do something for the plot, or if
Mhm,
they're just entertaining eye candy, like the song at the beginning of a Bond picture.
mhm,
Half
mhm.
of the time, those opening credits are the best part of the movie.
Or even Casino. Casino had a great opening.
Yeah, or but when you get the things like, uh,
It's just the credits
well,
over pictures, over old drawings of sea
right,
monsters.
or like it's like when you're watching a Star Trek movie and the opening credits are just a POV shot of moving forward through space
Mhm,
with text.
mhm.
When I
Like
when I
motion picture.
was watching these when I was watching those on video, I routinely just fast forwarded the opening.
Mhm,
The music is wonderful, but it's so boring that I
mhm,
had no patience for it. And that's what this is. It's just if you cut that off or just superimposed the titles over what's
mhm.
happening at the beginning, you miss nothing
Right.
because the opening is nothing.
Let me tell you something. Two of the most beautiful words in our modern language are skip intro. I make use of that skip intro feature on my streaming services. God bless them. I mean, they are just.
It depends on the show for me, but for the most part, newer ones. Uh, Ever since Lost, then
Yeah.
the theme song was one note, and it was just you see
It was
Lost,
just
and
a graphic, and that's it.
and then that was it, and there was no theme, and TV themes just kind of fell off from that point.
That started with Seinfeld
Yeah, I
because
guess.
Seinfeld never really had an opening. It just the music and then the title, and then
True,
you went right into the
true,
episode.
true.
Um,
But
but
that was a show about nothing, and it was the antithesis of every other kind of show.
right,
When every
right,
show started to do that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's
yeah.
wait.
Well, what I love, and I was noticing this the other night, and I had to laugh because the first thing you see in the movie is Dustin Hoffman in a helicopter,
Asleep.
and they have to wake him up for the movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like Dustin, we're starting now, and he, are we there yet? My
Huey Lewis has to wake him up.
yeah, my feeling too. Are we there yet? No,
Yeah,
no, we just started. We just.
Huey Lewis has to wake him up.
You know what?
Why is Huey Lewis in? Why is he in this movie? in such a nothing role.
Not doing music.
Without doing music.
Where's the news?
And he says something about the dialogue in this movie is very confusing. He says something about apparently he thinks he's going to a plane crash.
Right, he's like, where's the plane crash? You know, because he's a psychologist that gets brought in, I guess, to do trauma counseling on site.
Well, yeah, on-site trauma counseling. He's apparently a specialist in airline disasters or on-site counseling.
Right.
I'm not sure how that works, but I guess you have a psychologist for anything nowadays.
He is in a field, trauma counseling, that at this point in 1998 was about to take off in tragic form.
Yes, it was. He was about to get a lot of work.
Yes. Because a year later was Columbine, and once that happened, the floodgates were open.
Yeah. Well, wasn't this... When was the first attack on the Trade Center? That was 93, wasn't it?
And it was
93,
it
okay.
was a bomb in one of the parking garages.
Okay.
It went off, but it didn't really do much damage, if I remember correctly.
Well, it killed 3 people.
It did kill 3 people. It did damage. It didn't do what the next attack did.
Right. Okay, but here's where I'm confused. Did they tell him it was a plane crash?
They told him nothing. He's assuming.
Okay.
Because he said, where's the plane crash? And he goes, what? And he goes, and Huey Lewis is like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What plane crash? And he's like, well, the plane crash that they're flying me into. It's my job to do this, and that's what I do. So obviously this is what the problem is. And I love it. Peter Coyote's like, oh, and what did you tell the pilot? He says, well, I told him I was coming to the plane crash. Plane crash? Great. All right. Yeah. Good one. Yeah. He's like, no, but there's no plane crash? He has no idea. He and we have no idea what he and we are doing there at that point.
For a long time.
For a long time. And Dustin Hoffman's character actually gets a leg up on us in terms of what's going on, because he figures things out that we never do.
Right.
That we can't,
well,
because we're not given the information, because 3/4 of this movie feels like it was cut out.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I feel like and I read the book.
Yeah.
I feel like for much of this movie, I'm being left out of a lot of need-to-know information.
Yeah. This is like we're the grunts, and we're like the people that like. Well, we would like to know what the mission is, sir. Well, it's on a need-to-know basis, and you don't. That's what this tells the audience.
Well, that's when he meets Peter Coyote,
and you don't. And
when he meets Peter, now, I understand what they're doing because they're trying to build a mystery, but. It's done in a very frustrating way because he meets Peter Coyote,
which has to be frustrating at the outset anyway, because you know as soon as you meet Peter Coyote, there's
something's up.
There's government interference somewhere along the board. Like
he's kind of he notes himself as kind of a black hat kind of guy.
Yeah.
One of those. I work for the government, but I don't really work for the government. Right. Wink, wink.
I love this one where he says, well, who are you? And he goes, have you heard of OSSIS? Yeah? Well, they don't know who I am. Really? Because you're wearing their fucking clothes.
Well, and Men in Black explained this a little better. You know, Division 6, there is no Division 6.
Right.
You know, that's basically what this is.
Right.
It's Division 6.
But to say, oh, have you heard of this organization? Yes. They don't know who I am. Okay, let's go do this job for the organization that I just mentioned.
Right.
That doesn't know who I am, but I'm wearing their clothes and they're paying my bills. What the... So...
2.5 minutes into this movie, I'm already frustrated.
Oh, yeah. And the movie is a solid 134 minutes.
It is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Because when I click that on, because I watched this, I watched the DVD on my PS4, and I clicked on the little thing to see how much time I had, and it was 2 hours and 14 minutes, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh.
I didn't remember
Say it ain't
I
so,
didn't
Joe. Say
remember
it
how
ain't so.
long the movie was until I started watching it a second time, and at that point there was no way I was taking it off of the list because I'd already watched half of it and realized the
Yeah,
story.
you're already invested. You're already down the
Yeah,
uh,
I already fell down the storm
you're
drain.
down the rabbit
Yeah,
hole. Yeah,
I fell down
yeah.
the storm drain. I might as well see where I get to float.
Well, I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm remembering how it was the first time because honestly, here's the thing: the first time I saw this, there was so much distraction in the theater going on. I thought I'd missed something in the story.
Yeah,
No,
no.
it turns out it's just a shitty
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. I guess you had that to hold on to for a long time. It's like, well, maybe I just didn't get it because I missed all this because of the circumstances. Yeah. I bet Barry Levinson did not make one of the single worst movies of the '90s. I'm sure he couldn't have been. That wouldn't have been possible. Oh
This
wait,
is
no, it
so
is.
scattershot and so badly constructed and so oddly constructed that I always do this. I sit there and I wonder, and I did this with Star Trek Five. I did this with a lot of movies that we do in Turkey Month. I imagine there had to be a screening once the movie was over with the
Yeah,
executives at the studio.
yeah.
There had to with the top
Yeah, there
brass.
always is, and especially because this was not. I mean, as you said, they were planning this as a Christmas release. That
Right.
is not a slouchy time to release things.
And this cast is not a slouch either.
No, you've got.
This is an A plus
I
cast.
mean, two-time Academy Award winning actor in your lead slot,
Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin
And two
Hoffman.
former previous nominees,
Yep.
Sharon Stone and Sam Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And future nominee, Queen Latifah.
Yes.
And then you've got Liev Schreiber,
Mm-hmm.
who Liev Schreiber is one of those actors that he's a very good actor, but never seemed to make his way up to kind of like Ray Liotta. Just never quite
Yeah.
made his way up to the.
Well, Liev Schreiber went about his career very, very differently.
Mhm.
He started being the actor, and he is a very good actor. And then by about 2006, he got to make everything as illuminated.
Mhm.
And from that point, he more or less just kind of dropped off the front of the screen and
Yeah.
stayed behind it.
Mhm.
So it's you don't really see him that often anymore, but his work is continuously out there. Like he does a lot of I think he does a lot of TV directing.
Well, he's on Ray Donovan now,
Mm-hmm.
so this may be the part that he's remembered for.
Yeah.
One thing I don't understand about him now, he has a very distinctive voice.
Yes.
If you've ever seen, there's a really interesting History Channel series called "The Story of Mankind" that he narrated,
Hmm.
and you can tell it's his voice because he's got a very distinctive
Yeah.
baritone.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do to his voice in this? It's higher. It's not. It's something. It's almost like he's got a squeaky
So
voice in a way.
they
It's weird.
they did that with all of them,
Hmm.
and it's okay. It's actually a sound design choice because if you remember when they're being pressurized for the
Hmm.
depth, they explain that the mix is more um, helium rich than
Right.
oxygen rich because the oxygen could actually become poisonous at that kind of compression depth. So they have to work in more helium. So they're all talking with this thing, and when they put these little necklaces on that are supposed to be voice
Oh, the
regulators,
voice regulators.
which is nonsense, but anyway, it's my impression that they then, when they were mixing the film, turned everybody up just a little bit so that you could subconsciously be reminded that they're breathing helium without them having to call back to it very often.
that's
It's
pointless.
yeah, no, there's no reason.
Why would you? Yeah. Oh, okay. Anyway, the trajectory of this basically is that he takes Huey Lewis. I mean, if this is it, takes him out to the middle of the ocean, and there are all of these naval vessels out circling like battleship,
Well, I mean, that's the power of love.
and yeah, and
He had to
he
make sure
takes
that
him
he got
out.
back in time. All right, I'm done. I'm
Right,
done. I
right.
can't. I'm done.
He needs a new drug.
Oh.
But he takes him out there and he's given the information. First of all, it takes him a long time to get the
A
information.
lot of time.
That he goes out and he finds out that there's a craft at the bottom of the ocean,
It's been there for 300 years.
which they figure out by determining the formation of the coral. And Sam Jackson figures out that it's been down there for 300 years.
Right, because Sharon Stone is a marine biologist, I guess.
And in the book was a zoologist,
Right, and
which would make more sense in this
yeah,
case.
well, neither of those job titles makes her qualified to be a physician, which she ended up doubling as.
Right. Sam Jackson is a mathematician.
Right. Who doubles as a structural engineer and electrical engineer and
Why don't we just give
mechanical
everybody a
engineer?
job?
Like everybody who does like Dustin Hoffman is playing a psychologist
Yeah.
who is well versed in quite a number of different things that have nothing to do with psychology.
Now, I want to mention this also, and I understand why they did this for the movie, but in the book, when they go down to this thing, there's like a naval team with them.
Yeah.
For safety, security, and all that, which makes
running the damn billion-dollar, probably trillion-dollar facility that's at the bottom of the ocean.
right. Those characters are not in the movie,
No.
and I get it for crowd control.
Yeah.
But it makes no sense because what you've got is you've got your central cast of scientists with all of these letters behind their names. And you've got Peter Coyote, Maria Garza, and Queen Latifah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only three functioning people that are running this thing.
Right, and then by the time it gets down to the end, everybody who knows how to run the thing is dead.
Right.
How is it not falling apart?
What?
I mean, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the characters first of all. Now, I want to tell you this: biggest stars in Hollywood. When they mentioned their names, I didn't know one character from another. I didn't know. I know who Norman is because they say it about 400 billion times.
And Harry.
Harry.
They say
and
Harry about 4 million times.
Elizabeth.
Is that
Elizabeth?
her name?
I think it is Elizabeth.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharon Stone.
Sure.
Liev Schreiber.
I don't know.
But when they mentioned somebody's name, I didn't know who they were talking about.
Yeah. When I was rewatching it a couple days ago, I think like Friday night before we did this, and they're going through and they say this person's dead, and this person's dead, and there's nobody left to be able to run this. I'm like, wait, who were they? And when did they die? Because I didn't remember that either.
I have to go to IMDb and look up their characters' names so I can figure out. If I have to do that, you haven't done your job.
I remember, and how they died. Like I remember Queen Latifah dying.
That's the most ridiculous death scene. That was horrendous. I mean,
I remember when that happened, and I can remember vividly Liev Schreiber dying because he gets melted by an exhaust port.
Right. Parboiled. What a way to go.
But the other naval officer that was there with Queen Latifah, She just goes out, and then when they find her and she's dead. I don't know how she
Yeah,
died. I don't know why she died,
some heavy
and
editing.
I don't know how Peter Coyote died. I don't even think that's shown. And if it is,
They
I
at
can't
least,
remember it.
I'll say this for Event Horizon. At least Event Horizon had the good taste to note that all of this was
Yes,
ridiculous.
yes,
At least that movie had the good taste to say, we know this is ridiculous, so we're going to throw in a wacko,
yeah,
batshit
yeah,
Sam Neill
yeah.
performance. This movie doesn't have that courtesy
No.
because when you're watching this, it is almost impossible to follow. I had to go read the synopsis on Wikipedia and had to go and listen to a podcast before we did this
Well,
episode where they're talking about this just so I could understand what was going on.
see, the problem with Sphere is that it is. Bear with me. It is Michael Crichton's rehash of Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris put through the Crichton lens, and then it is readapted out into this movie, which is basically this movie is uh, it's the Andromeda Strain uh, meets um,
Solaris.
Solaris. Because I recently, when the lockdown started, I watched the Andromeda Strain for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was watching this, I'm like, this is almost the same movie as the
Yeah.
Andromeda Strain,
Mm-hmm.
done by Robert Wise. Not nearly as good. And then trying to work in these metaphysical aspects of Solaris, it just does not work.
It doesn't.
It does not work.
This is Solaris for stupid people.
Yeah, yeah.
By stupid people. Because honestly, this movie explains itself to death and you still don't
And you
understand
still
it.
don't understand it. I think Steven Soderbergh did a better version of Solaris than Barry Levinson did.
Yeah, but it puts you to sleep.
It does, but it's still
My wife and I went to see that,
it's
and I
still
was just like,
better than this.
my wife and I went to see that, and afterwards I was like, I need a nap.
Yeah,
This is just,
yeah.
ugh. Well, the thing is, they discover it's. Let me see if I can work through this as I understand it. This thing has been down there. They calculate for 300 years.
Right, because doesn't Sharon Stone says the coral grows at a rate of an inch a year. You can set your watch to it.
Right.
Which I don't really know how you set your watch to a length, but
Yeah, I don't.
I get what she's saying.
Well, and then Sam Jackson guesstimates that it's been down there since about the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
And bear with me. When they find this thing, I was seriously disappointed because when they find it, it looks like a naval base.
Mm-hmm.
When they open it, it is catwalks, it's metal, and I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
all this money, and this is what they came up with.
Yeah.
And at the middle of it is this golden sphere that is not reflecting. It's not reflecting them. And apparently it's solid. And all Sam Jackson can think about is getting inside of it. And when I saw this, when I saw the golden sphere, I thought, well, that's interesting. When they look inside of it, this is when I saw it the first time, I thought, okay, when they look inside of it, it might be like a 2001, Stargate thing.
Right.
Because, when they look into it, it's going to be like, that kind of, no.
No. He just his reflection gets carried up to the top of the sphere, and
That's a stupid looking effect, by the way.
ridiculous. It's like it's stealing his soul, and then he just collapses down. And I don't know. It's this.
I don't know what happens to Sam Jackson in this movie. Honestly, from that point
Well,
on,
no, he's
I am
like
buffaloed by what happens to him.
he's his consciousness, I think, gets taken into the sphere,
Yeah.
or part of it, or it's talking through. You know what? I don't know. I don't get it. I don't
Because when he
understand it.
comes
It doesn't
back,
make any sense. It's awful. That's why I
they
picked it.
find him and they can't wake him up. He's alive, but they can't wake him up. And when he wakes
he is
up,
in what I would consider to be painful REM sleep.
well, when he wakes up, this is really strange. The thing with the calamari,
Yeah.
it turns out that this thing is reflecting all of their fears.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a scene where he's sitting in his in the galley, and they give him what he thinks is onion rings.
Yeah, and
Now he's a mathematician.
yeah.
Okay, he has degrees,
He got
and
his
he
first
can't tell the
he got
difference
his
between
first
onion rings and
he got his
calamari.
first degree at 19 from MIT, or
Right.
17, one of the two. But yes, I've so
Well, he
they don't
eats it.
taste similar, basically.
No, and they don't look similar
Yeah,
either.
no, that's
And he takes a bite of it, and Liev Schreiber
choking.
um, thinks that he's choking, or thinks that he's having a reaction, and tries to give him
The Heimlich maneuver.
the Heimlich. But it turns out no, he's just afraid of it.
Yeah, I don't. I hate squid. I hate squid. I hate squid. Okay. So, but now you get the impression
Uh huh. Yes.
that Dustin Hoffman knew that,
Yeah.
because he makes it a very special point to say, "Here,
Hmm.
how's this? Oh, this is delicious. I am enjoying this thing that I just put in my mouth. Do you know what it is? It's not onion rings. Oh, well, what is it? It's calamari." It's like he springs it on him because it's like gonna be this revelation. But
Yeah.
I think he's trying to get him over a food fear in the worst possible moment you could be
But
trying to
again,
be
this
his
is never established.
psychologist. Like, I don't understand what his end game is.
It's never
No,
established.
not much is established.
And they
Despite the fact that this movie takes about an hour to start, nothing actually happens in any of the movie.
let me tell you, the last hour of this movie is just an agonizing series of just jumbled stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. There are motivations that aren't clear. There are explanations that never
Yeah.
materialize. There are things. One thing that I still cannot figure out. There is a scene where, and here's a cliche: the black woman dies first,
Yeah.
and Queen Latifah has the most ridiculous death I've ever
She's
seen.
attacked. She's swarmed
And
by
attacked by
jellyfish.
killer jellyfish.
Now, okay, so, all right, we it's a supernatural situation. The jellyfish killing her. I'm like, okay, there's some weird thing happening with these. All right, then Sharon Stone is doing the autopsy.
Wait, before you get there. When she's being killed, Liev Schreiber turns on the the PA, so everybody in the module can hear her die. And Dustin Hoffman is sitting there
And
looking so indifferent.
yeah, like there is nothing on his face during the. And I think the worst part is, I think they were trying to have that be an actual concerned reaction.
No, he's just sitting there.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there looking at the screen.
Yeah.
He's not doing
Right.
anything.
And he's just
It's like he's taking a break.
Yeah, and like he's just watching it and is like, oh, well, that wasn't a very good episode of Crew Member Dies. Maybe tomorrow's will be better.
Yeah, yeah.
That's basically his reaction. Now, they're at the autopsy table, and this is one of those instances of both of us are relatively certain that this got edited the crap out of.
Mhm.
Because she takes them out, she starts looking at the jellyfish, and she says, "Well, if these are jellyfish, they weren't put here by God, or they're not natural. They're this kind of jellyfish has never existed in the world before." And Dustin Hoffman goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And then they don't explain it.
They don't explain it.
It's like, okay, well, what is different about them? Normally, that is the setup to a look. See, this part here does not happen in jellyfish when you see them up on the surface. These are
Mhm.
things that I've never seen before because of X, Y. No, just these don't exist in nature. Boom, next scene.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what makes them different? How do you know? Why can you tell? No, we're not going to know that.
They have an interesting idea here.
Mm-hmm.
This ship, modern ship, spirited away to, what was it, 2043, and then sent back in time
Oh, no.
to the 18th century,
No,
if I understood it
you did
correctly.
not understand it correctly. Uh,
I
sorry.
didn't understand a lot of this movie
This movie is so dumb. So what happened? Um, this is a
because I
ship.
didn't understand it in the book either.
So this ship has logs going through, and it's from our future.
Okay,
It's from the 2040s, or the 2140s, or the 2240s, or the 2840s, whatever.
something.
It's from that time.
Yeah,
And it's out in space, and it encounters a temporal distortion that throws them back to the 1700s,
okay.
where they, I guess, land because they can't get back out.
Because
Or
they find that guy who's dead.
right. So what happens is, I guess they land the ship underwater
Mhm.
or crash or something, but they're like, there's no damage, so it looks like it was just landed.
Right,
Regardless, it's there under the ocean, and the crew went nuts and killed each other.
right.
And it's all probably because of this sphere, which is not human in origin. They presuppose. Peter Coyote gets really specific in not knowing what's going on, because he's like, well, their job was probably to go around the universe and collect things and bring them back. Why do you even think that? How is that like? When I saw the thing, I'm like, oh, that's whatever they've developed for propulsion.
Okay,
Normally, the creepy thing is the inexplicable gravity drive or something like that
yeah.
that will kill you if you try to, like in Event Horizon,
Like in Event Horizon, yeah.
or the perpetually collapsing neutron star that's at the heart of a TARDIS, or
Event Horizon had, I will say this, had at least a much better launching point so that we understood what they
it
found.
had clearer internal logic.
It had clear internal logic.
This does not have
This
any
does not have
internal
any
logic.
logic because this just keeps throwing stuff at it and hoping that it will, it's supposed to be this haunted thing and it's manifesting your fears, but it never gets to that.
No.
And when it does get to that, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's no reason for any of it. Then by the end of it,
And
they're like,
then,
"Oh, I guess we all went into the sphere." Well, did you? See, okay, so there's about 40 ways that this could have uh, been explained.
There's
And
about 140 ways this could have been explained.
but in the end of it, you could have actually said that they'd been in the sphere the whole time since they
Hmm.
found it, and that's why things got crazy go nuts, and
Yeah.
that they were trapped in there.
Hmm.
Okay, fine. That would actually make it a better movie
Yeah.
because it would then it would give you a frame of reference as to why this weird stuff is happening.
Right.
But no, they're not in the sphere. And they end the movie in a way that I wish I could have done.
Right.
They end the movie going, "Okay, we'll agree to forget that any of this happened." It's like, guys, why can't I do that? I can't do that. You can't do that. That's not fair. If they get to forget this happened, I should be allowed to forget this happened, and I can't.
This feels like it was being written as they were just being rewritten as they were going
It's
along.
without the benefit of the Epstein brothers.
Right.
Because that's how Casablanca was made too, and that turned out significantly better.
Well, you sit there watching this going, I'm sure somebody understood what was going on.
Mm.
I'm sure somebody had to, because like I said, when this was all over and they were going to put this out for public consumption, there had to be a screening there with a group of executives from this studio.
I wonder how many of those executives actually watched this all the way through.
I don't know. Because I can't imagine that a group full of professional filmmakers would have sat there and watched this and said, yes, this is a finished
Oh,
product.
this wasn't a room filled with professional filmmakers. It was a room filled with professional studio executives, which know nothing.
But I mean, even Barry Levinson and his writers
Well,
had to look at the finished product and say, this is shit.
I'm sure they were not proud of their work at the end of it.
And maybe they had wagged the dog to cover it up.
Yeah.
But watching this, I'm thinking I'm in the mindset of they had to have sat in a screening in the editing suite and watched the final project and think, this is
Mm-hmm.
garbage. This is not going to work. This is a terrible movie.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe you figured this out. What the hell were they doing when they left the habitat?
I don't know because I was so focused on. Um, I was generally focused on this whole thing with that Queen Latifah was trying to do. She was talking about um, this thing, and this sounds like a Crichton thing. This module that they send up, if everybody on the module dies, if everybody on the station
Right, and it's not
dies,
reset. It automatically triggers with the logs so that
right?
they know at least up to 12 hours before this happened what happened. A partial record.
Okay, so what are they in at the end of the thing? Because apparently it's made for, I don't know what it's made for, but they are ass to elbows in this thing.
Okay, so um what I don't understand is like they get out of there because the reason that they couldn't get out before was because there was a storm up top
Right, right.
and they couldn't send down the sub because it was too dangerous for the people, so they couldn't send it down until the surface calmed down.
Right.
So that's what they're in. Because if you at some point Sharon Stone says, "Oh hey, the sub is going to be here in 6 hours. It's over."
Yeah.
It's like you haven't been paying attention to the other hours that this did,
Right.
because 6 hours, there's a lot that could happen, and the situation has not resolved itself.
Right.
There's still 6 hours for things to go very horribly wrong. And so that's what they're in when they're going up. Now, my question is, why were they so worried about continuing to reset the sub after they found out that everything was going wrong?
Right.
So all of the
Exactly.
people who can run the facility are dead. And they're, well, we've
Right.
got to get back
The
there.
three
We've
people.
got to get back there so that this doesn't go up and alert them that something is wrong so that they come down to help us. I'm like,
The three
wait a
characters
minute.
who were.
Yeah, the three
Yeah.
characters that could run the thing, but their job becomes not letting this submersible go back up.
Hmm.
But if it did, it would tell the surface that things are wrong.
Right.
So why don't they want it to go up?
I don't know.
Because,
You know why? Because I gave up on
oh
this.
yeah.
Look, let me tell you something. I think it was probably about an hour and 15 minutes into this movie. About the point where, I think it was probably about the calamari scene. That's the point where I gave up because because I was focused on the movie. I was
Mm-hmm.
focused on what was going on.
I checked.
But I had my hand up.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
teacher,
yeah, yeah,
I've got some
yeah.
questions.
I
You
checked
know,
out when the giant squid attacked after Sam Jackson talked about being afraid of the squid attack in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And
and
that
what
he's
was the deal with
reading
the book?
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Well, okay, so the things were being manifested
I got a headache
by
now.
them. Yeah. Try watching this when you actually live day to day with a constant headache, which is what I do.
Hmm.
I have chronic migraines and usually have a head pain
Yeah.
7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Hmm.
So this, imagine how I felt.
Yeah.
Um, so when they found out that the book was only up to how far Harry had read,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is fucking stupid, and I checked
Yeah.
out. Like once I figured out that he was causing everything, which how do I figure that out way faster than an entire naval base filled with people who have more degrees than I've even seen.
Or again, a room full of professional
Right.
filmmakers.
So like as soon as that happened, I'm like, okay, this is too stupid for this to continue, and I'm done. I know who the problem is. I know what the problem is, and none of them can seem to figure this out whatsoever.
And the other problem is that you don't
Yeah,
care.
no, not even almost.
Because at one point, and I'm sure that somebody understood, I'm sure that somebody understood this story, maybe. The problem is this movie is so scattershot. It has no, there's no, I don't know what
You
this
know what?
is. The whole thing, this whole thing with when Leo Schreiber starts communicating with whatever's in the sphere was so frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
When they start talking to whoever is in there or whatever is in there, I'm thinking, okay, and the first time I saw it, I thought, okay, now we've got
Mm-hmm.
something.
Yeah, I thought there was
Okay,
going to be something that stemmed out of those conversations that would have led it, but no.
because they have a conversation and God help me with this. They have this. There's all this code on the
Mm-hmm.
screen, and somehow the code breaker, Liev Schreiber, figures
No,
out
no,
that
he doesn't. He thinks that it's random or binary,
uh,
and Sam Jackson comes up, looks over his shoulder for half a second. The
yeah,
mathematician
okay, yeah.
says, "Nope,
In my
there's a."
mind, it was the other way
He said,
around.
"No, there's a pattern here."
Mhm.
But the way that he deduces it, it feels like he already knew that, and he was just going in there with that information because he's already been into the sphere.
But for plot convenience, For plot convenience, it's like half a second, and he just
Yeah.
looks at it and he knows.
Yeah.
But he figures out that
It's a
there are
QWERTY. It's a
letters.
QWERTY keyboard on a sphere.
Yeah,
So they do that, and everything is cylindrical, spherical going out. So they make this adaptation of their keyboard,
yeah.
which I think was a clever scene.
hmm But they
But
start
that's as
talking to
far
it.
as it goes in being clever.
They start talking to it,
And talking and talking and talking.
and they start talking to somebody named
Yep.
Jerry.
For the record, I did not remember that the antagonist's name was Jerry until I
I never
started
forgot
watching
it
this. I'm sure you didn't forget it. It did not stick in my mind.
because the phrase "What happens when Jerry gets mad" stuck with me for a while. Um, but they start talking. The thing comes back, and it's talking to them like a child.
Yeah.
And I am happy. Why don't you ask Jerry? I got my hand up. I'm like, why don't you ask Jerry who he is? Why don't you ask
Yeah.
him
Exactly.
a million combinations of
Right.
questions?
And the trouble is that now it talking to them, and Liev Schreiber explains it perfectly, like short, to the point, non-threatening. It is doing first contact protocol that we would have.
Yeah.
Give it basic things. Let it learn the language. So
Mhm.
it's basically what Arrival did perfectly.
Right.
But we don't have that here. We just
No.
have. So I mean, he explains it, and then it makes sense why it's childlike. But then he goes into, oh well, if it's got emotions, I would have been happier if it was emotionless. And now we've got this emotional being who's been pent up for 300 years. What's going to happen if he misinterprets something? But
Which is a reasonable
yeah,
concern.
but the impetus of the trouble does not stem from them doing anything.
Right.
He just snaps for no reason whatsoever other than it was that time in the plot.
Who are you? Where do you come from?
How did you get
What
here?
is your purpose? How did you get here? What is your purpose? Um, but they keep asking it all of these weird, arbitrary plot hole
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
They're not asking the logical. Okay, what happens when Jerry gets angry? Well, ask Jerry.
Well, I mean, and even that, it's they could have gotten all of that information just
hmm
from a couple of questions before they even get to what happens when Jerry gets angry. Okay.
hmm
And I would get not asking an entity.
Yeah.
So if you get mad, what do you think you would do if you got mad?
I mean, he's a psychologist. It's a reasonable question.
Eh,
But it's
but not
also
that
in the
but not that
interest
early.
but also in the interest of trying to develop a relationship, you don't want to ask that
Right.
question too quickly.
And
But you do want to ask specific things.
like how are you feeling? I mean, we're glad that you're happy. Is there anything that we can do that can make sure that we all stay happy? Is there, you
Right.
know, how did you get here? We want to understand you, so please talk to us about you. They never do that. They never, once they establish
No.
communication, they stop communicating.
Right. And when we find out what he is, I was just okay. I was like, okay, I am done.
When it's really hairy, somehow that's when
Yeah,
they're
and
talking
they
back
found
to
out
him.
that they coded the wrong name,
Right. It's the one
and
letter was off.
if one letter was off,
All of
everything
the
would be
yeah, yeah.
off. It
If
wouldn't just be in the
because
name, it would be every time you use those letters,
because
everything would be just would be
You see
chaos.
where it used appropriately H's and J's in other
Right.
words.
Right.
So there's no way that a mistake would have not been noticed.
Right. A typo is not a typo would not happen here
Right.
without completely unraveling
Right.
everything. And oh God,
Unless the
I
person
was
was sitting there typing it out as they were saying it,
yeah.
maybe then a slip of the finger could be explained.
Right. Exactly.
But it's the
A typo like
program.
this
It
would
is
not
a
happen in this
program that
situation.
is decoding all of this. So it is the computer that, literally, the computer that makes this mistake. And that's not how things would. That's not
When we
how.
got to the back half of this movie, I sat there and I thought, when we got to the back half of this movie, I sat there and I thought, okay, I have given up. I've given up trying to follow this. I've given up trying to. I know that what they did was they put together a movie nobody could really understand because it feels edited to death. It's trying to explain itself, and the more it tries to explain itself, the less sense it makes.
Right, because I think of the stuff that got cut out was probably largely exposition,
Yeah,
because the movie feels like it was.
which you probably
It
needed.
probably did. My guess is that this had originally been planned at about 3 hours,
Yeah.
and had originally been delivered at about 3 hours, and they said,
Mhm.
we're not putting this out at 3 hours,
Yeah.
and cut it down, and maybe, I mean, and it's still 2 hours and 15 minutes. If you can't tell your story in 2 hours and 15 minutes,
Right.
3 hours isn't going to help it any.
Well, if you can't make it make
Right.
sense,
Like, long movies are fine when they know that the story they're telling warrants the length.
see, the movie I compare this to is The Abyss. Because The Abyss,
Well,
at least,
because go ahead.
because The Abyss, at least, first of all, had characters
Yes.
that had at least each character had a distinctive personality, and you knew who they were.
Right.
And there was some drama in the fact that the two leads were going through a divorce, but were stuck in this situation. So there was something going on, and they realized that they had to set aside those personal problems for a much more global problem. And when this tidal wave happens in that movie, there's a purpose for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for it. There's a reason for everything going on.
Mm-hmm.
But when you saw it in the theater in 1989, you didn't know any of that.
Right, sure.
Because the end of that movie felt abrupt, which you didn't figure out for another 5 years until Cameron came up with a longer version that explained the ending of that movie.
Right. And
And it made sense.
watching Sphere is like staring into the abyss,
Right.
not watching the abyss.
An abyss of nothing.
Right.
Because this movie, like I said, the more it tries to explain itself, the less sense
Listen,
it makes.
I agree that the abyss is very, very, very similar. I thought about that too. Uh, the other thing that I kept thinking about with this movie was a very relatively obscure Bob Dylan song
Mm-hmm.
called "Too Much of Nothing." And the one line,
That's what
yes,
this
this is
is.
too much of nothing, and too much of nothing will drive a man insane. And
Mm-hmm.
that is Sphere.
I got nothing. How much nothing?
Too
Too
much
much nothing.
nothing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's what this movie
yeah.
is.
And so they tried to make this about 78 different movies, and not a single one of them works.
Yeah.
Um, and what was the deal in the 90s trying to make Dustin Hoffman some kind of leadership action hero because you've got Outbreak, you've got this, and there's at least 3 or 4 others that put him into this situation where he's like, gotta be tough. Dustin
I
Hoffman
know
isn't
why he
tough.
was in this movie. I know why he
Well,
was
because
in this
Barry
movie
Levinson got him his
because
second Oscar.
well, he he read the script. He said it was a mess, and he was convinced that Barry Levinson could fix it, and he couldn't. Nobody could fix this script.
No.
Literally, the only way you could fix the script is
Burn it.
to take the pieces and parts, like they did in Jurassic Park, completely wipe it off, take the most interesting stuff, and turn it into a cohesive narrative. But they didn't do that. This is a lot like Event Horizon, in which just random stuff happens.
Yeah.
You have an intriguing idea, and it's your fears and nightmares come true. Well, drop all that shit and just make an exploration film.
And you know what's funny? They came out a year apart.
Yeah, it came out a year apart. And like I said, Event Horizon is a better movie because at least it knows how ridiculous it is. This is
Well, one of
I think they were skating on the cast and the fact that this was a science fiction movie.
right, they were really banking,
And a Crichton novel.
Yeah, a Crichton novel. Barry Levinson is not a person that you probably are concerned with having your movie.
Yeah.
You know, in his hands. He usually turns out something half decent or really good.
Barry Levinson's not a director I think about very much. I don't really anticipate his work, but I'm there when I'm usually, it's like Barry Levinson. Okay.
Yeah. When it was like, oh, it's a Barry Levinson movie. All right, well, this will at least be entertaining to a point.
Yeah.
You know, Diner isn't a great
I
movie, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's an interesting character study. I like Liberty Heights. I like a lot of his stuff. But he's better with characters.
Yeah,
than he is with all of this action stuff.
Yeah, there's no.
This is.
Barry Levinson works best when he doesn't have a plot that he has to move forward, just that he has a story that is going along because of characters. This is not a character-driven story. This is just all plot.
If it needed anything, this movie needed him to inject this story with some characters
because
that we care about.
Everything is archetypes and cliches, generic situations, generic characters out of the box.
Generic dialogue.
Every single joke doesn't work.
Right.
The only time I laughed in this whole movie, and they tried a lot of one-liners, I laughed uncontrollably for a second or two when Sam Jackson said with a helium voice, "Follow the yellow brick road."
Yeah.
I laughed uncontrollably for 2, 3, 4 seconds. I was like, "That's hilarious," and then it was.
I liked it when he was singing Bally High. That was kind of that was funny. But here's what needed to happen. It needed to be the first hour of the movie, and then the last hour of this movie is them trying to explain it to a board or some kind of military tribunal, trying to explain to them what happened.
Right. This is the debriefing.
Or the debriefing. We needed something.
Yeah. No. But what we got was, well, if we can't,
it manifests your fears.
Oh, no.
I don't care. God.
None of that matters. But when they get to the surface and they're sitting there and they're in the decompression chamber.
Yeah.
And they say, well, clearly, whatever happened to us, we don't tell anybody because we're not dead and that's still there. This is basically a time travel paradox. It's a causality paradox, because if they said something, then that wouldn't have gone down, and then therefore that wouldn't have just happened.
Right.
But that's actually not a coherent way of thinking about time travel.
Right.
Because it would just create a new splinter reality. It would just
Hmm.
create, that's a new timeline now. And that's all there
Yeah.
is. The
Hmm.
other one doesn't exist. It's just this one.
Right.
So if they had changed it, if they had said, hey,
Hmm.
and it goes on record and there's notes and things and oh, they're going to encounter this at this time, here are the logs, here's the shit,
Hmm.
don't do it. Well, they would never know that it didn't happen because that would be a completely new
Right.
timeline that would have no effect on them whatsoever.
Hmm.
And therefore, their logic is completely and horribly flawed, which is really upsetting because it's the astrophysicist, metaphysicist that comes up with this concept, and
Right.
what he's saying is the antithesis of metaphysics, even at that point in history. Now, granted,
Right.
this is, you know, over 20 years ago,
Hmm.
but even at the time, we knew more than that.
Yeah.
So,
I love how you're trying to work this
to
out. I really do.
say,
I just love how you're trying to work this out because this movie's a piece of shit, and you are picking peanuts out of shit, and it's entertaining watching you do that. I mean, it really is.
it just to
I'm just sitting here
to
smiling. I'm
say
like,
to like have the end of the movie just be okay, let's forget that happened. If the point of your movie at the end of it is to forget that it happened, why did you make it?
or if you want to make this make sense, have them be in a military tribunal, and they are forced to keep it
Right,
quiet.
something. But
And the end credits, the end of this movie is the sphere coming out of the
shooting
water.
out into space, it's like, well, if it could do that, why the hell didn't it?
Why didn't it do this before? And over the closing credits, because it's just white text on black. Show us where it
Yeah,
went.
what happened to it? Why did it go? Where did it go? How did it go? And if it could do that in the first place, why didn't it leave 300 years ago?
Why don't you just have our main cast at the beginning of the movie when they find this thing, board the thing, and then it takes off and goes through the cosmos, and we get to see where it goes and learn something about it.
There are 1,000 different ways that this story could have been good.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it was written by Michael Crichton, and therefore 999 of them were
and not adapted
disregarded.
very well.
Yes, and it was not
Yeah,
adapted well. The book wasn't that good in the first place. My
the book made about as much
Yeah, Michael
sense.
Crichton was not that great of a writer. I'm sorry. I know it's sacrilege for my generation to go, you know what, he kind of sucked, but he did kind of suck. He wasn't he was a populist author that
His books were very hard to
yes,
read.
and his stories made very very little sense.
That's not me being stupid. That's literally you read his books and you're like, I have no idea. It's a lot of explanations about stuff.
That don't really have much bearing on the plot or
Right.
on the story or on the characters. It's
Mhm.
just general scientific postulations throughout half of his work.
Of stuff that he's interested
Right.
in.
At the time.
I mean, you can tell at the core of every movie that he does that he's interested in certain things. Jurassic Park, he's interested in genetic
Mm-hmm.
engineering. Congo, he's interested in communicating, the communication with animals.
Westworld. The
Westworld, he's
concept
interested
of
in,
humanity and artificial intelligence and
right.
what can we accurately call consciousness and things like that. Like there's stuff going on. He's
Timeline, he's
yeah,
interested in time
he was
travel.
not a dumb man and not a dumb
It's
writer.
very
He was a
intelligent.
very intelligent writer. He just wasn't a good writer.
Right.
He his writing style left a lot to be desired
Right.
because he tried to write emotional thrilling stories from the standpoint of clinical dissection. It didn't work.
by a science
Right.
teacher.
He tried to be the guy standing back and giving the lecture,
Hmm.
but what he should have been doing is trying to involve us in the characters in the story.
Right.
He wasn't. He all he was interested in is telling us, not having it mean anything.
Right.
And
That's all I got.
he's very frustrating, and this is not the only bad Michael Crichton book. This is
Oh
not the
wow, this is
only.
not the only bad Crichton
No,
adaptation.
uh,
Congo sucked.
this
This
is,
sucked.
however,
Lost World
one of the
sucked.
worst. Uh,
I mean,
Eesh.
ugh,
I hate this movie, and
I do too.
I am now glad that I have exorcised it from my life, because now I will never have to talk about it again. What do we have next week?
Next week we have the weirdest, most goofball movie that Arnold Schwarzenegger ever made, and
That
that's
is
saying a
saying
lot.
quite a bit.
That is saying quite a bit. This is the Dino De Laurentiis, a movie that really didn't do much damage to his career, to Schwarzenegger's
Well, it
career.
didn't do much to anything.
It's a 1986 action picture called Raw
Yes,
Deal.
that I think
I kind of love this movie in a bad movie
I
kind of
think
way.
I think when we watched it, when I watched it after you said, "Hey, this is what I'm picking," I think I was probably the
Mhm.
first person to watch it on Amazon since it became available.
Yeah. No, well, you were the second
Well,
because I was the first.
yeah. So yeah, it's miserable, and
Mhm.
I follow up on the miserable '80s nonsensical action by
Mhm.
choosing a movie that no one remembers, and if they do, they have tried hard to forget it. Uh,
Mhm.
one of those people being Jay Leno. It is Collision
Yeah.
Course from 1989, starring Academy Award nominated actor Pat Morita and
Mhm.
Jay Leno before the Tonight Show.
Before the
How he
Tonight
still
Show.
got that gig after this movie happened is impressive. Because
Jay
I
Leno
wouldn't have
is
given him the time of day, let alone a show after
Jay
this.
Leno's a really smart
Oh yeah,
guy, but I preferred Jay Leno in interviews that people are having with
yeah,
him rather than him giving
yeah.
interviews. Um, because he's a very intuitive guy.
He's a good comedian.
He's a very good comedian. Well, uh, I didn't watch a lot of the Tonight Show that he was on.
I actually saw his stand up before he got the Tonight Show, and I liked
When he
him.
was on Johnny Carson.
Well, yeah, and on like whatever the MTV half hour comedy hour of VH1 stand
Yeah.
up spotlight. My father used to watch all of these, so
Mm.
I saw all of these stand ups before anybody really even knew who they were because they were just on television and I saw them.
Yeah.
And I got to see Jay Leno on a few times, and I liked him.
Yeah.
But
Well,
his time
he
on
laughs about his film career in much the same way that Tom Hanks laughs about his early film
yeah,
career and all the junk that he
Jay
put out.
Leno knows how bad this is.
I hope Pat Morita knew how bad this was.
Yes. Um, and the only reason he was in that is because of his popularity after the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And somehow they were like, well, let's give him a starring vehicle. And they made
Yeah.
Pre-Rush Hour,
Hmm.
and it's nowhere near as good as Rush Hour.
It looks like one of those movies that was released on like
Yeah,
1992 would have been released directly to
exactly.
video.
Yeah. Um, it's not nearly as good as the movie that became Rush Hour, and Rush Hour isn't even all that good.
No.
But it's leaps and bounds better than Collision Course.
And all of them are miles better than the movie we're going to end Turkey Month on
Oh,
because my God, I'm going to win Turkey Month
you
this year
you know
because
what?
the
I've
last.
watched all of the movies that we're doing except that one so far.
Mhm.
I was waiting until after October so that I could work it, not have it in my horror movie month. I'm dreading this thing.
This is Kirk Cameron's Saving
It is
Christmas.
Kirk Cameron's war on Christmas that
Kirk
has
Cameron
never
has
existed.
lost his damn mind, and
Yeah.
I'm convinced. And believe me, you haven't seen the movie yet.
No.
Trust me, he's lost his damn mind. If he believes half the shit that he's spilling in this movie, he is certifiable. I don't know.
Regrettably, I think he's gone even farther into that.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a whole thing about it.
We'll get there. I guess.
Yeah.
That does it.
The next week, Raw Deal.
You can find all of our back episodes at the podbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com, where you can find all of our previous turkey months for your listening pleasure. You can find us on iTunes and YouTube. Hit the like, subscribe, and get the notifications going for you. You can follow us at pod_bay on Twitter, and same at Patreon. We thank you so very much for joining us, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.